Welcome, everyone, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I am joined this week by a very special guest, Kindra Maples, CEO and founder of The Culture Crush. Kindra, thanks for coming on the show today.
I am so excited that I get to join you today, Hayden.
This is going to be awesome. I had the great opportunity of meeting Kindra and a whole host of other really amazing people a few weeks ago at Elite Entrepreneurs. We're actually going through and doing, we're going to have several episodes sitting down and chatting with some of the awesome people that I got to meet down there in the Phoenix area. It was great. Last week, we had on Christy Holt, who I got to speak with for a few minutes. This week, we're having on Kindra, and we're going to have a couple more guests over the next couple of weeks. So anyways, it was an awesome event that I got to chat with you at, Kindra, and we got to learn a little bit, however briefly it might have been, about the Culture Crush and all the cool things that you're doing there. But I think the first place we've got to start, I think it makes the most sense for our audience, is to get familiar with who you are. If you wouldn't mind, talk a little bit about your career background and what kind of led you to be a small business owner, founder. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely started in a different area than where I am now. So I the transition, not everybody else does. So my background is actually in animal behavior and training.
Oh,
So
cool.
my background is in training animals, and now I train people. It's all the same. You train a polar bear, you train some teach some veterans, you train your mom,
Yeah.
you
You
build
do it
you
all.
build a
You do it
team.
all.
Yeah.
Okay, the internet cut out, might have cut out just a little. Did you say you trained a polar bear? Is that true? Okay.
I I did. The internet didn't cut out. Yes.
Oh
That
my
was
gosh.
probably one of the coolest things that I can add into my resume is that I've trained a polar bear.
That's freaking cool. Well, at some point today,
Yes.
we might have to hear a little bit more about that story. But that's awesome. So you were in animal behavior and you did some training for that. Was that something that you kind of
Yeah.
always wanted to do growing up, or what kind of led you down that path? And then maybe what kind of made you want to make the transition to something else?
Yeah, I was definitely that kid that growing up, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. When I was in junior high, I went to the counselor's office and I had all the information about how to volunteer at the zoo. I knew that this was the
Yeah.
space I wanted to be in. My counselor actually said, "Oh, you're too young. You don't have to worry about this." So I walked out of that counselor's office into another counselor's office. Said, "Can you be my counselor? I know what I wanted to do."
Yeah.
So then being able to do that and accomplish training animals like polar bears and things like that, I started to transition to training people to use the animals for presentations. And that's very different. It's one thing to train an alligator and to hold it, it's
Yeah.
something different to train a person how to connect with that animal and then do presentations. And then that just kind of shifted into working with the teams and shifted into that leadership and operations side. And that's where I really, really started to just have a passion and thrive. I still have a passion for animals. I love animals. I'm never allowed to go to any adoption day. I'll bring them all home. um,
I feel the same way. Like my wife talks about all the time about, hey, we should foster some kittens or foster some, and
yeah.
I couldn't do it because I would just end up with 50 animals at my house. I
Mhm.
couldn't do it.
I'll have them all. We have a bunch of stuff to drop off to one of the Humane Society um, locations near our house, and I have had to give all of this stuff to my mother and say, "Can you please drop this off?" Because I will come home with, I'll come
Yeah.
home with the animal that's like the old dog that nobody wants. I'll come home
Yes.
with it.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yep.
not allowed to go.
That's
Yeah.
100%. We're kindred spirits that way. So
Yes.
that's funny.
Yeah. So
Oh,
it's
I
still
love,
part of me.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and I love that it was just like, again, that's why these conversations and having people on podcasts like this is just really cool because outside looking in, you would see training people, or sorry, training animals, to now we're talking about culture and training. Like, it doesn't seem like it would make sense, but the way you described it
Yeah.
makes perfect sense, right? Like, as you got better at what you were doing, you kind of started getting into some training and leadership roles where you were trying to help people learn how to build these relationships with animals and do all of this. And it just kind of, it totally makes sense how, as you
Yeah.
started to elevate your career, you're like, wow, this is something that I'm also really good at and feel like I can, excel at, I guess, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term. So did that,
Yeah.
did it come to a point where it was a little self-reflection where you were like, this is, I want to pursue this further than continuing to do kind of more the hands-on specific animal training? Was there a particular moment that you saw you were like, yep, this is the path I've got to go down now? Or did you just kind of look back at one point and were like, oh wow, I've been doing this for the last 5 years or 10 years, and you're like, this is what I want to do now?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. There wasn't necessarily a moment where I said, okay, no more animals, just
Right.
people, right?
Right.
It transitioned over time. And then I
Yeah.
got to a point where it was really important for me to have some flexibility in my work schedule to be able to help my family and support my family. And in that space, when you're working with animals, when you're in the event space of working with animals, you are there when the public is there, right? So if
Yeah.
there's a nighttime event, I was there. If there was an early morning event, I was there. And it stretches you. And so I got used to these crazy, crazy hours and schedules, and there was no routine and no consistency. So for me personally, I looked at that and went, okay, I love this, but also I really want to grow in the people side and grow in the way where I can have a little more structure in my own life too.
Love it. And
Yeah.
that's like a very natural transition when it comes to like being a small business owner, right? Like I think a lot of
Mhm.
people, that's what they're hoping to do, right? When they own a small business or start a business of any size, right? Like they're like, okay, I want some more flexibility in my life. Um,
Yeah.
you end up probably working still a lot of hours, but you have the flexibility to control those hours, like when those hours are
Yes.
happening. You're not at the mercy of a schedule as far as you have to be to this certain event for this certain training or whatever it is. Like you're probably still working 40 plus hours a week,
More.
but it's
Yeah.
much more at your like when you want to work, which is the flexibility that's really cool when it comes
Yeah.
to being a business owner.
Yeah. And that's what then led into this culture space was as I shifted into people and operations and training on that side, I was also working for a couple of different companies. And I had the opportunity to work for some companies that had a great company culture. And then I had what I say the pleasure of working for some that did not.
Yep.
And at that point, I really started to kind of put these pieces together, do a lot of studying and a lot of research. And I'm one of those lifelong learners when it comes to culture. And that's when I really started to put that kind of path in place
Yeah.
with the people and the operations side, but then the culture part in particular.
So yeah, and I feel like this is kind of the natural because I've had similar. Well, I feel like I've had very similar life experience where I've have worked at both places that I feel like either really get the culture or don't. I've worked at like
Mhm.
very small organizations and businesses, and I've worked at some. I mean, I haven't worked for maybe anything that's. I've not worked at like Google or Facebook, but I've worked at some larger companies as well. And company culture is a buzzword, and it's something that everybody talks about
Yeah.
regardless of the business. We have a great culture, we have a great culture. And I
Mhm.
feel like it's become a buzzword because I feel like there are a lot of businesses that can't clearly define either what is their culture, or they feel like their culture is really good, but if you talk to maybe some of their more frontline workers, it's not. And so
Mhm.
why do you think, and maybe I'm incorrect in my thinking, but I feel like we're kind of on the same page with regards to that. Why do you think company culture is a buzzword, or it's something that people are always either talking about or maybe advertising? We have a great culture. You know what I'm saying? Like, why
Yeah.
do you feel like it's become this buzzword?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of different parts to it. So, one is this has become a conversation of talking about company culture. Whereas I think back 15 years ago, my dad going to work. My dad did not care or talk about at all
Nope.
his boss valuing him or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like there was never a conversation. My dad worked in the motor industry. He was a frame technician working with his hands. He very much went to work at a certain time, was done at a certain time and went home. He did that job so he could put food on the table for us, right? And so at that point, this was not a conversation. You went to work so that you could get money and pay bills. That's how it worked. Now, fast forward, especially now after COVID, it is a conversation because people are starting to push the limit. They want
Yeah.
flexibility. They want to work from home. I mean, look at us. We're doing a podcast across the country from each other. You're
Yeah.
in your flannel where it's cold. I'm sitting on a patio today. And
That's
and
amazing.
all of right. And all of this ties into culture. Now the catch to it is hard to pinpoint what it is, how it works, how it grows. Everybody's got some different definitions of what culture could mean to them. And then, like you said, this is something that people are looking for. And so when you look at the statistics, about 47% of job seekers are looking for a job that fits with a good culture that they want. And so when you throw that stat in there, well, now you have businesses that when they're writing up their job description and the job posting, they're like, oh, we have a great culture. Yeah,
Yeah.
great culture. We have snacks. We have PTO. They're throwing in stuff like that. And that is what is adding to this becoming buzzy. It's
Yeah.
not really getting into the meat of what the culture is. They're just kind of putting it out there to attempt to attract people with whatever their culture is.
Yeah. You hit so many good points there. And really when you said I mean, I feel like COVID and the pandemic really like overemphasized to people like, oh wow, like it's probably, I mean, obviously I've got to get paid well enough to take care of my family, but at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, like whether or not I want to work someplace probably goes back to, yeah, what is the culture like? And what are my
Mm-hmm.
managers like? And what is the team atmosphere like? And that all comes back to this culture thing. And then, when we're working remote during COVID and we're freaking out about what the world's gonna be like, and we don't know, what when things open back up, what work's gonna be like I think at the end of the day, it all comes back to this culture thing. And um yeah, you had
Mm-hmm.
some great thoughts there. I feel like for me, with my experiences with like certain businesses and stuff, that they're more concerned with, yeah, the advertising aspect, that we can tell the
Mm-hmm.
world how great we are, and they're not necessarily concerned with the day to day of like, okay, what does the daily grind look like for your employees, and are they in a positive
Mm-hmm.
work environment, and do their managers take care of them and provide them resources? And they're more concerned with, you know I think about it a lot, like, um it's kind of funny, where I work now at Spot On Solutions. um we're concerned with being like one of the greatest places to work in Idaho. That's where we're based, right? And we're always looking at
Mm-hmm.
those metrics, and we are one of the, I think we finished in the top 10 best places to work in Idaho. I worked at a company a few years ago that was also really concerned with that, and they would love to advertise that they were the number one best place to work in Idaho and all of this stuff. But you talk to a lot of their frontline workers and they're like, I don't know who they interviewed or who they surveyed, but that is, I would not agree with that. And it's interesting seeing two different companies approach to it, because one, I feel like it's more of a byproduct. It's like, oh, if we get that thing, that's cool, but we're more concerned with how you're doing and how you're feeling and how you're performing, versus the other company, which was more concerned with the award than they were with actually what's going on with their employee. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's
Yep.
it feels like, if you want a positive, like, if you want to look at metrics of if your employees are doing well, that should almost be a byproduct of your culture. You shouldn't be so concerned
Yep.
with these metrics, that is this a great place to work, is it the number one best place, that you miss some of the actual important things. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm probably kind of
Yeah.
talking in
Yeah.
circles there a little
No,
bit.
and that's where they miss the mark, right? Because it also depends on what data are you looking at, right? Are
Yeah.
you looking at, oh, we give them parking passes or we pay for their
Right.
LinkedIn, right? Are you looking at that? Or there's a lot of companies that I've partnered with that they look at the actual employee surveys, right? So out here we have Arizona best companies AZ, and there's best companies all over the country, right? But best
Right.
companies AZ, they're focusing on those surveys and that data. So it's directly from their staff. So you can't lie
Yeah.
when that's the particular data. But that's where, I mean, that's where they're missing the mark in some of those spaces.
Right. And I think, yeah, the data is really, really important. But I feel like there's just a lot of things that
Mhm.
businesses miss when it comes to it that I think they could correct fairly easily. What are some things, as you've built the Culture Crush and as you've worked with more and more companies to try and help them create a more positive culture? Are there some things, or are there some easy things that you feel like a lot of businesses miss on that maybe they could look to improve? Obviously, we want them
Yeah.
to connect with you for those resources, but are there some easy things that you feel like, gosh, if business owners would just do this, it would be a lot better situation? Are there some things like that?
I would say there's a couple of categories.
Okay.
So when we think of company culture, I think the category and the topic that people are thinking of first is employee engagement
Yeah.
and the excitement of the workplace. Are they coming to work and having fun? And that kind of topic, right? That category. And it it's not the answer. Just because I
No.
go to work and have fun, maybe with one coworker of mine, that's not the answer to all of it. And so when I'm looking at company culture and my team is looking at company culture, we're looking at it from a very holistic and big picture view. So we're looking at areas like leadership and professional development opportunities. We're looking at things like diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, not just the DEI, right? That's
Yeah.
another buzzword or buzz acronym that companies are like, oh, we really focus on DEI. Okay, cool. Do you even know what these letters mean?
No.
Right? Um, so again, just a buzzword instead of really looking at all of the pieces, including inclusion and accessibility. Looking at areas of what I call it the fundamentals. Those are areas like pay, medical benefits. I was
Right.
working with a company at one point and their staff wasn't even being paid on time. And it was
Yeah.
like, okay, so
It's
none of the
crazy.
other work I do is going to help you.
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
if literally the reason for people working is to get money, take care of their family. If you're not even doing that on a regular basis, none of the other stuff that I'm doing is going to help you.
Right.
And so that being another category, looking at systems and processes. If your staff doesn't have the systems in place and the processes in place and the technology to actually do their job, that's going to cause another level of stress. And then that is a factor in culture. A piece of that is AI nowadays, right? Everyone's like, oh, I don't know about AI. I think it's fantastic. Implement some AI to get rid of kind of the BS part of people's jobs
Yep.
and then allow them to be human and do that part of their
Yeah,
job,
be more
right?
creative and think more big picture like you're talking, right? Yeah, like
Yep.
allow them to do the more creative things than have to worry about the mundane, simple tasks.
Yeah. Yeah. So these areas, right, looking at all of these areas, and they all impact the culture of the company and they'll influence the culture of the company. Those are all the pieces that really make up what is the culture.
Love it. I think,
Yeah.
a couple of things that I think of, or at least, that stood out to me, I guess, from what you're talking. The fundamentals are a big one.
Mm-hmm.
We work with a lot of small business owners that we're trying to help kind of grow their business through marketing and do some different things for them. But that is a common thing, that like something as simple as getting paid on time is a huge
Yep.
deal for your employees. And
Yeah.
it's something that you have to be able to take care of from the get-go. If you have a team, it doesn't matter if you have a team of 2 or 10
Mm-hmm.
or 30, it doesn't matter. You have to be able to like solve some of those fundamental things. And I love that that's like a
Yeah.
building block for you, that you were like, hey, are you doing this before we talk about anything else or any other resources? Like, are you making sure that you're taking care of the fundamentals? I think that's a huge thing that a lot of small
Yeah.
business owners miss. Um, and then the other thing that kind of stood out to me is the quote unquote fun stuff. I feel like businesses think we have a great company culture because we throw pizza parties, right?
Yeah, we
That
have tacos on Taco Tuesday,
yeah, and it's like that. Hey, that means our culture is awesome. Is like, give me a break, man. Like
right?
that's just
We
not
have
a
we
concern.
have we have coffee in the break room. Does that count for anything?
Yeah, like not
Yeah,
something not something that is really going to define what your culture is.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and
And what you guys do on the marketing side of things, that falls under that category of process improvement, right?
yeah,
Process and operations. If you have a small and growing team and you're in that space of maybe not quite getting a company to do the marketing like with you guys, if somebody else has that as their also, and other duties as assigned,
yeah,
that's going to pull away from their job, right? So
yep,
that is a huge part of company culture is identifying, okay, well, we need a company to take on the marketing piece so
yeah.
that that is taken care of and off somebody else's plate.
Yeah, we gotta outsource, right? We gotta
Mm-hmm.
outsource so that it's kind of to your AI thing. Like, not that we're AI here, it's about on solutions, but like it's we're gonna outsource this task or these tasks so that we can
Mm-hmm.
focus more on big picture, creative things like that. It's why anybody hires employees. It's why business owners hire employees.
Yeah.
um in theory, like, again, we work with a lot of businesses that they're doing home services, right? So they're doing carpet cleaning or they're doing
Mm-hmm.
restoration work or whatever, right? Like, technically, and this is how a lot of business owners start. Like, if, let's say, a carpet cleaning company, technically the owner is probably going to be the only employee for the first little while, right? They're in there
Yeah.
cleaning carpets, doing it all themselves. Eventually they hire employees so that they can go then think about other things like marketing, growing the business, working
Mm-hmm.
on culture, stuff like that. So yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
totally makes sense to be like, okay, if our culture is lacking, if our culture is struggling, maybe there are
Mm-hmm.
some processes that we could implement to help our team be more creative and have more time to work on other big picture things, which I would
Yeah.
think most people would agree is it is easier for them to manage
Mm-hmm.
than trying to deal with thousands of day-to-day tasks or whatever it
Yeah.
is. So yeah, I
Yeah.
love I
I
love that
agree.
conversation of that there are different categories to build a culture. It doesn't necessarily mean there's not one there's not one light switch that you can flip like, oh, we're going to fix it right now, right? Like, there's some different
There's
things that we
not.
can look at. How are your fundamentals? How are are you too focused on the fun stuff when there are some
Mm-hmm.
other things you need to be worried about? What do your processes look like? I love that there's all of those different pieces when it comes to it. Do you feel like um do you feel like one of those is maybe weighted? I mean, obviously, you talked about the fundamentals, that's got to be taken care of first, but the others,
Yeah.
do you feel like there's one thing that's weighted more heavily than others? If a company comes to you and is like, we've got a culture problem, we have high employee turnover, we can't hold on to our employees. Is there one thing that you are like, man, this is the most important thing? Do you weight those at all?
Not necessarily. And that's a
It's
really
probably
good question.
Well,
And
and
it
it's probably different for everybody, right? Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. It goes back to what you were saying about it's like a big puzzle, right?
yeah,
And every company's puzzle is different. And it's a matter of, okay, well, what's the piece that's missing or the two pieces that are missing? Another category kind of topic that fits into culture that I realized I didn't mention is mental health. So
yeah,
that one is a huge one, especially as we're still getting through, I bring up COVID again, but we're still getting through that and helping to support people on being their whole self and taking care of themselves and self-care and mental health. Well, how does that tie in when you're supposed to go to work and do your job at this time, right? So I would say that that's a big one that comes up often, but all of those pieces are going to be different for different companies.
yeah,
Sometimes we have companies that come to us and they think they've figured out the piece. They're like, ooh, we have a communication issue. It's like, okay. Then we deep dive and then we go, well, actually, the communication issue is tied to not having a process in place to communicate with each other.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
not
You
the
don't
communication, it's that no one knows how to communicate to
Yeah,
each
no one
other.
knows how to accomplish that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's a great way
Yeah.
to think about it. I had the process piece again, without harping on it too much, is something that I didn't think I didn't think it would connect with culture, but it does. It totally does, right? Like
Mhm.
if you have employees that if and again, I maybe there's probably other ways to measure it, but if you have employees that there's a high turnover rate, you're not holding on to employees, they're not staying with you for very long. Um, your processes could be something that you look at to be like, hey,
Mhm.
maybe people are getting burnt out because
Mhm.
we're putting too much on their plates, and maybe we can look at some processes to automate a lot of that. It's a
Yeah.
great thing to recommend. The Success Elevated podcast is brought to you by SOS Navigator. SOS Navigator is an on-demand training platform geared towards marketing, personal development, and business growth. We understand that as a business owner in the service industry, you wear a million hats. Let SOS Navigator be a simple and cost-effective way for you to continue to grow your business. Click the link in the show notes below and use code SOS Podcast to get 10% off your next on-demand training course. This is kind of a follow-up to this, and obviously we've talked about some of these individual categories, but at Elite Entrepreneurs and that event that we went to and that conversation that we had, and just with conversations that we've had internally as a team, has always been a big push for my boss. But um, a company should have and should always be looking at ways to better improve their vision, their mission, and their values.
Mhm.
Do you feel like those things are, maybe it's values more than it is their purpose or their vision statement? Do you feel like companies that have those things outlined well have a better culture, or do you feel like that they maybe get it a little bit more, or what are some things? Could establishing a vision or establishing some company values help with the culture a little bit?
I think it can help give direction, absolutely.
Okay.
But then you also have the other side of it where if the team is not bought in and actually putting
Ah,
action to the mission
that's
and
great.
to the values, then it doesn't mean anything. If the
Yeah.
mission and the vision and these values were put into place because the CEO thought of them over the weekend and wrote them out and they plastered them on the wall and they say, okay, this is us.
Yeah.
Well, if nobody else was even part of the process
Yep.
and they're not real things that align with the company's action steps currently, well, then it's not going to help go anywhere. Now, on the flip side, there are companies that are very focused on, okay, what is our mission? Does it align with what we're still doing? They look at values every year to reflect on those values and make sure, okay, are these things that still align with us? If that's what the company is doing, then absolutely that can help be a guiding star, right? Because then you can reflect on those and say, hey, this thing here, this value number two is one that we've stuck with and we're still living into. Let's keep it. Where this other one, we're not really doing that. Is it really us? And so it can go either way. If they're really aligned and they focus on it, then absolutely that can help be that kind of direction for the company for sure.
Well, and you mentioned it perfectly. I think you've got to have buy-in, right? Like you've
Mm-hmm.
got to have some investment from the team. And if you are setting those values without including your team in the conversation, like it's just not there is not going to be buy-in. Your team's going to be
Yeah.
like, I don't
Where's
agree
this
with
come
those
from?
values, or I don't agree with that mission statement or those goals. Like those goals don't align with what I do every day. Like, what are we talking about? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a huge piece of that is, and that's something, thankfully, I think, Katie and our leadership team has always tried to do is, especially with our quarterly and annual planning is like, okay, what do we
Mm-hmm.
want to accomplish as a team? What are the goals and what are our priorities? And how do our values fit in with those goals and priorities? And I think that's how you do it in a positive way and make sure that
Mm-hmm.
there is a positive company culture. Is you make
Yeah.
sure that there's buy-in and that people are invested.
And you're starting from day one with leaning into those values and that mission, because that's then going to influence the onboarding process. Are
Yeah.
you onboarding the right people? And are you even bringing the people that need to be on board into that space, right? Into that culture. There's a company I'm working with right now, and he's like, I just keep hiring really shitty employees. I'm like, I don't think you are. I think
Yeah.
something is wrong in that process
Yeah.
of what are you sharing with them that's false, that once they join the team, then they go, oh, this doesn't align with what I thought I was joining, right? It's
Yeah.
not that you're hiring all these crummy people. The process of getting them, like you said, bought in on that mission and the vision and values, something's off from day one of onboarding.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to, again, another process that would probably help that is like training. Maybe they're not being
Mm-hmm.
properly trained and they don't feel like they
Mm-hmm.
have the resources they need to succeed. And so they're like, see you, man. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna stick around if I don't feel like I
Yeah.
have an opportunity to succeed and grow. And that goes back to, yeah, a different process, but still a process that fits
Right.
with culture and training. Right. And
Yeah.
you,
Absolutely.
so with all of this, I feel like the key piece to this that is the driving force, that if this is not true, none of these other conversations matter. But business owners, whoever the business owner, whoever the leader is that's bringing you in to kind of coach them up on their culture, has to be pretty um, humble, right? They have to be pretty
Mm-hmm.
introspective to be like, okay, there is either something broken here, or maybe we're new enough that I don't know how to build it. So you're going to help me build it. But like, business owners have to be pretty like, they have to have a lot of humility to be like, okay, we aren't doing something right, or I don't want to start on
Mm-hmm.
the wrong foot if they're, if they're a young enough or small enough company.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for business owners out there that maybe think they've got it all figured out and they don't need any help, are there some ways that maybe they can look a little bit more introspectively and maybe develop some of that humility to be like, what can I do to work on and make my culture and make our culture better? Do you feel like that's a key piece of this? Maybe I'm missing, or maybe I'm off on that, but I feel like it requires a business owner to have a certain amount of humility, right?
It does. I think that's part of it.
Okay.
The other part is that business owner, that leader, that CEO, whatever that, those executives, they want to learn to be better.
Yeah.
And that's the other really big component. A lot of the companies that I work with are companies already on those lists of best companies. They're already getting awards for engagement, but they want to be better. So
Yeah.
that's the piece. It's like being a lifelong learner and always reading, right? I'm always reading and listening to podcasts and things like that. It's the same thing, but for culture. You can never
Yeah.
get to that point, and this is the humility and the humbling piece, right? You can't get to that point and go, we're perfect,
Yeah. We're
because
great at this.
we're not, right? We're humans. We're never going to be 100%. And so being able to recognize, hey, we're really good, but we could be better.
Yeah.
Or like you said, hey, there's this piece that's off. Maybe
Yeah.
not completely broken, but just off. And how can we be better? And to your point, right, have the humility to really reflect, listen to your team, and know that there is a piece to improve.
Yeah.
Now, those other companies that go, oh, we're perfect, we don't need anything, those are the ones I usually don't work with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the ones that think, we're perfect. And maybe they get feedback and they know they're not perfect and they know that things are wrong, but they
Yeah.
don't want to acknowledge it. Those are not the ones we work with.
Yeah. Or they're, you know, they're blaming the employees for lack of success, or like, oh, our culture sucks because nobody likes the pizza parties that I'm throwing, right? Like, it's just, there's
Yeah.
there's a frustration there that, listen, I have pretty strong opinions on this. I think the world would just be a better place if people looked a little bit more internally at their own problems instead of necessarily blaming the world and the environment around
Yeah.
them. Like, I feel like that's probably a whole other topic for a whole other podcast, but I feel like
Yeah.
it's the same with business owners, right? And I, I've had the opportunity to work for some really awesome positive cultures and some places that really don't have awesome positive cultures. And I've had the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity here at Spot On Solutions to work with some really amazing clients that are always looking to be better. Hayden, what can I do? What do we got to do to make our marketing better? What can we do on our end? You guys are doing great, but
Yes.
what can we got to do on our end to help you guys? And then I've also worked with people that are no longer clients that thought they had everything down perfect and there's nothing to improve. And it's everybody else's fault but our own. We know how to do everything
Yep.
perfect, and I just feel like there's a pattern there that it's like, man, you've got to have a certain amount of introspection or something to be like, okay, we're not perfect at this. We've got some improvements we gotta make. And that if you have that attitude all the time, your company's gonna succeed. Like you're never gonna get
Yeah.
to a point where your company's perfect. So if you can
Hmm.
change your mindset to be like, okay, how do I improve? What can I do to help my employees have a better experience here and be more successful? Because if they have a better experience, they're going to be more successful and be better employees for you. If you have
Oh,
that kind of
absolutely.
attitude, it's just going to pay dividends in the long run for you.
Oh, absolutely. And the data and the stats are out there now. Whereas how we said earlier, if this was 10, 15 years ago, there wasn't necessarily a way to measure all this. And now we have ways of measuring. We have the data to to show that in if you're investing in your company culture and your people and all of these categories that we've talked about, the mental health, the fundamentals, the employee engagement, the communication, the processes, this whole picture, the data is out there of how it will influence and grow your company and your people and
Yeah.
your customers. And there's positive outcomes for all of it.
Yeah. It probably doesn't end up being you know, a 1 + 1 = 2. There's probably some kind of there's different ways and different, obviously you've got to pull different levers and try different things in order for your culture to end up being really positive. But yeah, to your point, like I think we can pretty easily say and promise with the data that you're talking about that your company will be more successful and grow, and your employees are going to be more successful. And you know,
Yeah.
employers are always, every business, every company out there is like, how do I get my team to be more efficient? How do I get them to try and work harder and be better for our customers? I can guarantee you at the end of the day, if you have a better company culture and you're looking for ways to improve that, your team is going to be more efficient, help more customers. And it just, everything you
Yeah.
said, it's totally going to happen if you look
Yeah.
for ways to improve your culture.
Hmm.
Do you feel like at the end of the day, and there's so much more we could kind of dive into today, but I don't want to bug you too long, but there's so many different roads we can go down to. But at the end of the day, you sit down with a business owner and you're talking about these things. um I feel, do you feel like most of the people that come and chat with you, um that they have an attitude of humility, that they want to improve? I feel like it's something, maybe it's some it's a pessimistic attitude that I have about the world, that I feel like I wish people would look at themselves a little bit
Look
more.
inside.
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel like most of the people you talk to are trying to improve in some way, shape, or
Yeah.
form?
Yeah. And that's why I love the companies that we end up working with the most are companies that, like I said, they're already on these lists being successful in the space of company culture and they want to be better.
Yeah. Yeah, which is great. I need to probably not have such a gloomy look at the world, but I feel like that's,
I do sometimes too. It's okay.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I think there are a lot of, and granted, I work with some amazing clients, and my clients are amazing, and they're always trying to improve. And so I probably shouldn't have such a negative attitude when it comes to it, but I just, man, I feel like there's such an opportunity out there with culture and with your processes and everything, that if you would just be a little bit more introspective as a business owner, you could just really knock some things out of the park for your team. And I love it.
I agree.
Um, at the end of the day, I want to give you some time here to kind of talk a little bit about specifically what you guys are doing at the Culture Crush. So we've talked about all kind of big
Yeah.
picture, the ideas behind company culture, what makes a positive versus a negative, and all of these different categories that can help you improve your culture. What are you guys doing over at the Culture Crush that you feel like is really helping some businesses be successful with this?
Yeah. And this is uh perfect timing to talk about culture because there's now construction happening across the
Hey,
street.
I
So
can't hear it at
hopefully it's
all.
not
You're
too
great.
loud.
You're great.
Ooh, I love this. What we do at the end of the day, I want you to think of Culture Crush as your hub with all of those puzzle pieces, right? We talked about puzzle pieces,
Yep.
but which puzzle piece are you missing? We are the hub that has those puzzle pieces. And so a couple of times people have used this as an analogy, and I've stolen it because now it makes sense. Think of us as a combination of Angie's List and Match.com. So you're
Love it.
looking for that right piece, but instead of just looking for an electrician and saying, okay, here's the electrician in my area, we're matching you with that resource and that puzzle piece, right? That really is the right fit for your company because every company is going to be different and unique. That puzzle piece and that solution is not going to be the same, right? I have one company that's working on the HR side and the fundamentals and their pay, right? Then on the other side, I have a company that is working on mental health strategies and self care. And so remembering the conversation that you and I just had about company culture, about how it's so different from company to company, that is the backbone of what formed this company. So I was reflecting on my time with other companies when I was a middle manager and executive and everywhere in between. And I was researching online, I'm Googling resources for company culture. And you don't know where you're looking. You don't know if you're getting a vetted resource or not. And
Right.
so that is what built this company was the community saying, hey, Kindra, do you have this resource? It's like, yeah.
Right.
Do you have this resource? Yeah. And so we built the infrastructure for it. And so we, at the end of the day, are your hub for company culture resources. So we go in, we do the assessment, we figure out those pieces that are missing, and then how do we fix them? I don't have to be the one to come and fix those pieces, but
Right.
I have partners and resources that are the experts that do, right? The mental health side of things, perfect example. If I'm trying to help the mental health with your staff, I'm probably going to recommend a glass of wine and a bowl of mac and cheese. Probably not the right solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
This is why I partner with other experts. So we figure out those pieces, we do the assessment, we help figure out what's the right equation, right? You said earlier it's not 1 plus 1. So what's the equation and who's the resource that's going to fix that and help get your company to where it can thrive?
Oh, that's great.
In a
It's a great,
nutshell.
it's a great little plug for the Culture Crush. I was just pulling up your URL so people can find you at culturecrushbusiness.com, right? That's where they can find you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Learn more about what you offer and yeah, the different resources and tools out there that you can and connect them with. And I love it. It's a hub for people to kind of just continue to grow their business through this culture conversation.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I love everything about it. Kindra, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I've got to wrap up the podcast with the same 3 questions that we always wrap up every episode. I
Okay.
sent those over to you and I'm excited to ask
Mm-hmm.
them. So first and foremost, um, favorite book or podcast right now that you're reading or listening to, or that you've read or listened to recently?
Yeah, right now I am listening to, and I'm very much an audiobook person. I drive a lot. So right
Yeah,
now I'm listening to Atomic Habits,
great
and
one.
the timing of listening to this is perfect. I went on a retreat a couple of months ago, and one of the biggest pieces they talked about was, when you're goal setting, you have to put the process in place. And then what are those habits that build you to that point? And so now reading this book by James Clear I'm like, oh, yeah, all of this makes sense. It's all of the little pieces. So that is the book I'm totally hooked on right now.
Oh, it's great. Well, yeah, trying to get 1% better every day, right? Or whatever, like you're just trying to get a little bit better. If you improve, it doesn't matter how much or how
Yeah.
little, is if you're improving every single day and every week and every month, like you're gonna have a successful life. And so yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Second question. I know you wear a lot of hats, obviously, as a CEO and founder of the Culture Crush. So, and you're talking to business owners and you're doing a lot every single day. How do you relax and recharge the mental and emotional batteries at the end of every day?
Yep. At the end of the day, I try and do the no technology. I'll sit, I'll journal. I'm usually sitting with my old lady dog. I have a 16-year-old black lab,
Oh, that's
and she
awesome.
is, yep, she's an old little dementia little pup that sits with me in the evening. What I have been doing lately, though, so because I travel a lot, a friend of mine custom made this book. Oh, where are
What?
you? Kindra Maples. Can you see this? Look at how great
Yes.
it is. So she custom made this book for me. And in this book, I think everyone should get one of these, by the way. In this book, it's a search and find. It's like, where's Waldo? But I have to find myself in here. So this has now become
That's
my end of
amazing.
the day. I just sit with my old lady dog and I find myself in this search and find.
That's awesome. That's a great way
Yeah.
to shut off the brain at the end of the day, do something kind of fun. That is
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Your friend needs to start mass producing those for everybody. That's a really, really cool thing.
Yeah. I love it.
I love it. Okay. Last question, Kindra. This has
Mhm.
been, again, this podcast has been awesome. You've provided some awesome, awesome insight and resources, what you're talking about. Um, Last question. If you could rewind to the beginning of your career, whether it's the beginning of your career with Culture Crush or the beginning of your career in training animals and polar bears, which I still think is fascinating, and we have to talk more about that at some point. Um, Rewind to the beginning of your career and tell younger Kindra one thing, what would it be?
So there's two sides to this. The quote that I'm sure you've heard that you need to slow down to go fast. That piece, right, definitely resonates with just the growth that I've had, sometimes really needing to take a deep breath. And like it says, slow down to go fast. Also, the opposite of that. If you know anything about a buffalo or bison, same, when there is a thunderstorm coming, all of the other animals are running the opposite direction to get away from the thunderstorm. Buffalo run straight into it. They run straight into it because they're going to get through it and on the other side faster than all the other animals that are running away from it. And so I kind of take both of those. They kind of contradict each other, right? Go slow to go fast.
That's
But
great, though.
also, there are those times where you do need to go fast just to get through the storm.
Yeah. Oh, those are great, great quotes. And I think, yeah, I think at the end of the day, like I love the visual aspect of the bison buffalo thing. That's great. It helps to face some of those challenges head on. And I think you can still do that while going slow, but you can face if facing those challenges head on and going into them and just being like, okay, we've got to solve this problem or this process or fix this
Mm-hmm.
culture issue, right? We've been talking about culture today. It's going to end up being a lot better in the long run and probably even go a little bit faster if you do that and you face it head on. And so I love it.
Yeah.
It's a great way to close out the podcast, Kindra. Again, thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome, great conversation. And we've got to have you on in the future, probably to talk a little bit about some polar bears or something like that. So,
I love that. I'm up for it. Just let me know when.
okay, awesome. Thanks again, Kindra.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe on YouTube or any other major podcast platform to listen to more episodes. We are proudly brought to you by Spot On Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you grow your business, please check us out at spotonsolutions.com.